Talk some Sixers. We'll talk some NBA. He's now over at Hoops Hype. Alex Kennedy here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. As we've talked over the years about some dreadful basketball, but it looked like they were heading in that direction of some positivity. Last night, Alex, was really kind of that win that made you open your eyes, because the Clippers had been a team that really indicated the disparity between where Philadelphia was and everybody else was. I mean, they had clobbered the Sixers over the years. And I know Paul didn't play, Griffin on a minute restriction, but I really thought without Embiid to beat a team like L.A., that was kind of an eye-opening moment of, okay, things are really changing, and it really feels like the fans are sensing some change around the Sixers.
Yeah, I think it's really fun seeing the fan reaction at these games. When DeAndre Jordan was at the free throw line last night, you could tell even just through the broadcast on television that the fans were going nuts, and they certainly seemed to impact him. He had 2 air balls last night. But, yeah, it's great to see. The Sixers are competitive now, even with some of the most talented teams in the NBA, like the Clippers. Obviously this is a team that has a ton of star power, and Blake Griffin was back last night in the starting lineup. So, they had some of those guys on the floor. You had Griffin and DeAndre Jordan, those guys out there. So it was impressive. Nerlens Noel was incredible. He filled the stat sheet, did it on both ends of the floor. I think, to do that without Embiid is really impressive. And that just shows this Sixers team, I think they're for real.
Obviously, when you talk about the Sixers, it always comes to Nerlens Noel, Jahlil Okafor, and Embiid. And, it seems that when Okafor doesn't play, sadly, they're almost in a better situation. Like when he was announced out last night, I think people were like, good. Like, that's a good thing. It's sad to say that, but what is the end game for that trio, those 3 guys? We've been talking about them for 2 years now, the 3 of these guys. But in reality, what's the end game for Okafor, Noel, one of those guys?
That's a great question. I think obviously Embiid is the guy that you build around going forward. He's had a monster season. If he can stay healthy, then who knows how good he can be. The sky's the limit for him. So he's the guy that obviously everything's going to be built around going forward. And then it comes down to, I think, moving off one of those pieces. I think Noel has the most trade value. They've obviously talked to a lot of different teams about Noel, and he's been, mentioned in trade rumors for quite some time now. Okafor has as well, but I think Noel has been the guy that more teams are interested in, just because I think he's a better fit for today's NBA. You look at Noel, his defense, the fact that he's someone that can improve on the offensive end, I think, more than, you can imagine Okafor fitting in today's NBA with his style, just because you don't really see many guys that are back-to-the-basket scorers who can't really play great defense, who can't, stretch it out to the three-point line, succeed in the NBA, or have an offense built around them. So I think Okafor can be successful in a certain role, but I think that, I think there's more trade value for a guy like Noel, and that's what they've been looking at. So I think they continue to weigh their options, but certainly Embiid is the guy to build around, and you see what happens going forward.
Yeah, there's no question that Embiid seems like the real deal. How far has he exceeded not only your expectations, but when you talk to people in the NBA world, like it seems that every day, every night, he does something that has people talking.
Yeah, I mean, no one saw this coming. If you say you saw this coming, I think you're a liar. Not only that he's been able to stay healthy the way he has after so many injuries, and it's the fact that he's done this so quickly. When he was drafted, people talked about him being, potentially a great two-way big man that was able to dominate games, but they talked about it happening, years down the road. And that was with years of playing experience, not years of rehab and injuries and things like that. So I think the fact that he's doing it right now in his first season on the court is what's so impressive to me, because, he was a guy that was drafted as a project, not only because of his health, but because of his potential and because of the fact that he was really raw. I think that's how everyone described him when he was coming out. So the fact that he's been, this good on offense, the fact that he has this type of basketball IQ, it's really impressive to me because he doesn't have a ton of experience. He's a guy that started playing basketball late. He's a guy that everyone kind of talked about as needing time and needing, patience to deal with. So it's really impressive to me. I think around the NBA especially, too, he's obviously the Rookie of the Year. There's no one even close to him in all these stat categories, points, rebounds, blocks, double-doubles. he's been super impressive and exceeded all expectations.
Do you think moving forward, if they were to keep Noel, that Noel would be more than just a backup center? I mean, is there a way that they could get more from him? Because at some point you would hope that Embiid's minutes are going to be that closer to an every night player, 35 minutes a night. Brett Brown had said, realistically, I like to play him 35, 36 minutes when he's full cleared. What would that mean for Noel moving forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's the big question. What do they do with Noel and Embiid? How do you make this work? Because certainly you don't want Noel to be a backup center. You want to have your best players on the floor. And like you said, we talk about this team. You talk about Noel and Embiid as kind of the cornerstones. So you'd want to play them together if possible, but I'm not sure that that's able to work unless, one of these guys continues to develop and change their game a bit. We've certainly seen guys make sacrifices and then be able to change positions or change their role. So it's possible, but these guys are still young too. These guys aren't, veterans that can't change their game. So it's possible that, we could see one of these guys kind of alter the way they play so they can fit together. But it's a good question. I'm not sure anyone has an answer yet.
Your opinion on what Okafor's value is right now? I mean, I know we're about a month away, but do you think they will be getting calls on him, or do you think it's just like, hey, if you'd like to trade him, we'll put something together, but don't expect anything big?
No, I think there's still value there. He's still young enough, and I think there's a number of people around the league that still look at him as, being a top offensive weapon. He could be a number 2 or 3 option on a team. And I think there's still people who feel like he can improve on the defensive end somewhat. I think any hope of him being, defensive stopper is obviously gone, but I think hope for him improving on that end and being, more of a versatile player, someone that can do more than just score. I think there's still some hope there because he's young. I think when you talk to GMs, they talk about how centers take a long time to develop, how, it's one of the harder positions to adjust to. There's certain guys that take a few years before they're ready to kind of contribute the way you want to see from them. So I think he still has value. I'm not sure what that is. Maybe it's a few prospects. Maybe it's, some picks. But I certainly think that some teams still want him.
Luke Walton the other night had said that, he doesn't believe in tanking. He thinks you got to win. And it's funny because those are good things for the Sixers. But throughout all this, Alex, we've been hearing about they got all these picks and assets. A lot of them have hatched. One has not. That's that Michael Carter-Williams pick, which continues to put the Sixers in pretty good shape moving forward, even with the core that they're starting to build.
Yeah, I love that trade. Each year that kind of passes, it looks better and better, to be completely honest. I think everyone kind of looks at Michael Carter-Williams now and sees a guy that is probably a backup point guard in this league, and if he's starting, then you certainly have to have a lot of pieces around him. Now you're talking about that pick being, potentially a top 3 pick, potentially, a number 1 pick, depending on when they get it. I think that trade looks better and better as time goes on. So certainly it's getting harder and harder to kind of hate on tanking and say that it didn't work, especially with Embiid kind of becoming the player that he is with all the picks that are still, owed to the Sixers. Certainly it seems like they're going to have that star and be able to build around, Embiid and kind of put together a really nice team, an up-and-coming team with the process.
Yeah, and then I guess the follow-up to that is, our team's going to – and we talked a lot about this in the past, but it didn't seem like you could verify by answering because it hadn't happened. But now that you see where the Sixers seemingly are going, do you think more teams will start to follow suit? Are we going to see a league that, starts to say, hey, they got all these players because they weren't very good. We've got to go down that direction?
Well, I think there's a lot of executives that, would do that if their owner would let them. The question is, will an owner sign off on that? Because I've talked to GMs that would say, I would love to have that kind of patience from my owner. I'd love to go down that route because they do acknowledge that if you do that long enough and you do it right and you draft the right pieces, then you're going to be able to land a star player, maybe more. So I think executives totally understand it. You talk to executives and they say the worst place to be is in the middle. They say you want to be a contender or you want to be, closer to the bottom so you can get a top pick. So they understand, but it really comes down to owners. I'm not sure owners will sign off on it. That's the problem that I think you're going to run into as you run into more teams trying to do this.
Don't be surprised. You'd see a lot of – and a lot of it is because you look at a couple teams, Philadelphia, Minnesota, Milwaukee, who's got some nice young talent. I know they didn't get Antetokounmpo in the high part of the lottery, but to get your hands on those kind of talent, it is very enticing when you're kind of stuck in that middle. So we'll see where that evolves. Because let me ask you about the NBA. You look at this league as a whole, Alex. How many teams do you put legitimate title contender next to their name?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's not like the NFL where there's a ton of parity. You're going to have a handful of teams each year that you consider a contender. This year I think maybe there's 4 teams that people feel comfortable saying are a contender. And if we're being honest, I think everyone expects Cleveland and Golden State in the finals. After that, you may throw San Antonio in there, maybe Houston. If you're being kind, maybe Toronto in the Eastern Conference or Boston, if you think they're going to turn things around eventually. But, yeah, I mean, there's only a handful of teams that are contending every single year. And I think the NBA wants to change that a bit. We kind of saw with the new CBA that they're changing the free agency rules so that teams can, keep their star players through that designated player extension. So, but that's another reason, to kind of tank and assemble a team that has multiple star players. If you can, keep that star long term, that's even better. The question is, does the NBA come down on tanking eventually? That was kind of the thing that people threw around when Philly was doing it and blatantly doing it. Rule changes to stop tanking. If more teams decide to do it, I think it's something that you're going to hear more about again from the NBA.
Alex Kennedy, Hoops Hype is where you can read his stuff now. If Ben Simmons doesn't get hurt this year, where's this team today?
Oh, man, they're a playoff team. That's a great question. Ben Simmons is someone that succeeds when he has talent around him. And I think the big question was, if he didn't have shooters around him or if he didn't have scorers around him, what would he do? But now you put a star like Embiid next to him. Embiid immediately would have a number of, easier looks every single night, easy baskets. And for a big man, that's what you want. That's going to get their confidence up, get them playing better on both ends of the floor. And, Simmons, I'm really excited to see what he can do. I think he's going to really surprise a lot of people. I think his game really fits the NBA style where you have more spacing and talent around you. This team will be a playoff team, and I'm really excited to see what they can do when Simmons comes back and Embiid continues to improve and the other young pieces get more experience. This team could be very, very good.
Yeah, I guess the follow-up to that is, do you like the very little we saw of Simmons in Summer League and what you know about him from LSU, his skill set and how it pairs up with Embiid? Because obviously Okafor is a guy, you like his skill set, it doesn't pair up well. Does Simmons' skill set pair up with Joel?
Yeah, I think so. I think, you want to see if he can still develop some of the outside game because it would be great to have that inside-outside attack. You want to see if Simmons can improve that jumper. But we knew that anyway. Everyone kind of talked about Simmons coming in and saying that, he should improve his jumper. But his passing ability, I think, makes him a good fit alongside Embiid. I want to see what they can do in the pick and roll together. I think that's a lot of fun. But, yeah, in Summer League, I mean, even the little play we saw from him, he was making crazy passes and, again, finding guys for open buckets and creating offense with his court vision. And, anytime you have a dominant center, you always want to get them easy buckets. I was in Orlando whenever Dwight Howard was here, and, I've been around the Pistons a lot with Andre Drummond and some of these younger, centers that are up and coming. Their coach always stresses, getting them involved early, getting them the ball, getting them a number of points. And then you see better defense from them. You see them passing the ball. It just helps to get a young guy, at a center, easy buckets like that early in the game. So a guy like Simmons who can, pass the ball the way he can, it can only help Embiid and the other players too. I think he's the kind of guy that elevates his teammates' play all around him. So I can't wait to see what he does.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem like Embiid needs a whole heck of a lot of help to get baskets. I mean, he seems like he can create some on himself, by himself. You give him a guy who's going to suck some defense towards him. That I think that pairing is going to be lethal when you put those two guys on the court together. But over the years, we've talked about a lot of the other guys. What have you found out about the other guys this year? Are there keepers on this team? Are there guys that you like that are good fits? I mean, I think Ilyasova is going to be a really interesting conversation for that front office moving forward. You got him as kind of a veteran, but then you got a lot of other guys who have been around this process, the McConnells, the Robert Covingtons. They seem like they're going to have some interesting decisions to make moving forward.
Yeah, and that's the other thing that people don't talk about enough with the process. You get a chance not only to bring in potential stars, but, whenever you're looking through the league and signing free agents and, having a bunch of second-round picks, you get a chance to look at a lot of these guys and find out, okay, who is a guy that's undervalued and can actually be an NBA contributor and who doesn't belong. And I think whenever you kind of go through all that process and find, different guys and bring them in, you get a chance to evaluate a ton of different players. Whereas a playoff team, they try to have continuity and, keep their roster basically the same. So you don't really get the chance to go and evaluate these guys the same way. But certainly I think Robert Covington's a guy to keep. Ilyasova, it's funny, I just watched him get traded to Orlando in a salary cap dump. Orlando, got rid of him in the OKC trade. It's crazy just to watch, how he was undervalued so much and people were ready to give up on him. And now he looks really good. So I think Covington's really good. Ilyasova's been good. Rashawn Holmes is a guy that has a lot of athleticism. McConnell has exceeded all expectations. I'm excited to see what this rest of the supporting cast can do.
Yeah, you mentioned Rashawn Holmes. He's the fourth guy at that position. You wonder, are teams going to call? I mean, does he have value somewhere down the road? Do the Sixers, spin him off to try to get something? Because the few times that he gets extended minutes, he obviously shows that he's an asset for teams.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what this is all about. Getting assets and showcasing guys so that they have more trade value. And they did that from the very beginning. They wanted more possessions so that they could increase guys' stats and have more footage of guys on highlight reels and things like that. It was all about showcasing these guys so that, one, you could see who could play, but two, you could up their trade value. So certainly I think that's been part of this whole extended process as well. So I do think that NBA teams, certain NBA teams that have a need there, will look at some of these guys and think, okay, what is it worth giving up to get a guy like that, especially as they keep winning? Before you could say, okay, he's putting up numbers on a bad team. Now if they're winning, it's hard to say that.
They're in an interesting spot now because they are winning, but I don't know that they'll win enough to be in the playoffs, but you're in that no man's land. I mean, what would your opinion be on, the rest of this season's success? I mean, if you're not saying you want them to lose on purpose, but if they finish like as the 10th seed, is that a disappointing end, or do you look at it differently for them and say, you know what, you finished 10th, you exceeded expectations, good job, or did you kind of stunt the process a little bit?
No, I don't think so. I think with where they're at and, the guys that they've brought in, the assets they have now, I think you want to take that next step forward, especially because they have other picks owed to them. You have the Lakers pick. You have, I believe, 2 other picks coming in over the next 2 years from other teams. You're going to have first-round picks coming in. They obviously have their own picks. But if it drops down a bit, it's not the end of the world, I don't think.
And the pick swap with Sacramento.
Yeah, exactly. You want to take that next step forward, I feel like, and, make the playoffs if possible. That would be amazing for this young team. They get so much experience. Obviously, it would get the fans really into it. Obviously they're into it right now, but that, is how you take the next step. And I think if you have this many young guys, you want to make the playoffs. But if they are the 10th team or 9th team in the Eastern Conference, certainly you can't be disappointed about that. That's a step forward. It just comes down to next year. It's probably the year that you're looking to go all in and play all these guys and try to make a playoff push.
Alex Kennedy's with us. If you are, by the way, over at hoopshype.com now, formerly Basketball Insiders, now Hoops Hype for everybody who's heard him on the show over the years. Knicks, you feeling good if you're a Knicks fan? I mean, are they moving in the right direction at all?
No, not at all. It's really tough there because, Carmelo Anthony, his name's mentioned in trade rumors, but not only does he have the no trade clause, he has a 15% trade kicker. So he's going to get a big bonus if he gets traded too. But it also just gives him tons of control over the process. But that was why I didn't understand, back in a few years ago in the offseason, whenever Phil Jackson gave him these things, they were going to re-sign him anyway because they were offering the most money. Chicago was interesting at the time, but Carmelo even admits that he was coming back to the Knicks no matter what. So that's where you have to kind of look back at those decisions and wonder, did you give him all the leverage and all the power here? And it makes it tough to rebuild going forward. I think if you're the Knicks, they kind of went all in this past offseason, but now you're seeing they're trying to build around Porzingis going forward, and I think it's the right thing to do. But now with where they're at, it's kind of tough to trade off these pieces and rebuild because Melo can kind of choose where he goes. He has leverage, and we've heard Los Angeles, Cleveland, those are kind of the only places that he'll look and waive the no trade clause, and that makes things tougher on the Knicks.
Yeah, and I don't know about you. I like Porzingis. I'm not sure he's the superstar player that can be the guy. I mean, do you think he could be the guy on a team?
I really don't know. I think it's possible, but like you, I want to see more from him. I think people are ready to put him up there in that category with the superstars in the NBA, but it's just so early. I think you want to see more from him, and other guys that are kind of being mentioned as in that same class as Porzingis are Giannis Antetokounmpo, Karl Towns, guys like that. It's just because we haven't really seen guys like them in the NBA before. I guess Embiid's in that same category, but it's guys that are doing things that are new, that fit the modern NBA. They can play multiple positions. I'm curious to see if he can, reach his full potential and become a superstar player, but it's still so early. It's hard to say.
Couple quickies. L.A., they had that great start. They're fumbling. I mean, they've been terrible. They continue to play Nick Young, Dang, Lou Williams. Are you feeling good about the Lakers moving forward?
No, I'm really not. And I don't understand, when they made those moves in the offseason, I didn't understand it. I get wanting to have some veterans in the locker room to help younger guys as they develop, but I'm not sure, why they're kind of playing those guys and not playing the young guys. It seems like this team's taking a huge step backwards. They just had the biggest loss in franchise history against the Dallas Mavericks. Luke Walton, he doesn't really have answers, it sounds like. He's been a good young coach, a good first-time coach, but I'm not sure he knows what to do right now, and that's somewhat concerning. They could be a team that trades off some of these older players as the February 23rd deadline gets closer.
Who do you feel better about, Philadelphia or Minnesota?
Man, that's a tough one. I'll say Minnesota right now. I know that listeners aren't going to like that, but it's only because we've seen more of these guys. We have more film to evaluate of guys like Wiggins and Towns and Levine. It's tough to say. I think they're probably 1 year ahead of Philadelphia when you look at kind of their rebuild. But certainly these two teams are really set up nicely going forward.
Alex Kennedy, hoopshype.com. That's where he is now. Congratulations on your move, by the way, Alex. And, of course, basketball's back here in Philly, right? Basketball's back. We finally have an NBA team again.
Yeah, I love it. Thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it.